Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about the movie, The Curse of Audrey. What's the title here? The Curse of Audrey Earnshaw. It's a 2020 movie. I think it's on. Well, it's either on Netflix or Prime. I can't remember which. I think Prime. Anyway, this movie is in the vein of a movie I really liked, The Witch, which came out a few years earlier and which I reviewed on this channel. Um, I am starting to have a better liking for um, dark, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like satanic-y movies. I never liked them earlier. And I mean, even still, zombie genre is my favorite. And I like slasher movies of the horror genre. Um, but there are some really good ones in this genre. As I said, The Witch is one for example. I like movies that explore the theme of religion. And I don't mind, like I admire religious people, but it's not a whatever an unreflective or uncritical of. I understand and have noticed obviously that there are some serious vices attached to a religion, not per se, but per accidens. And the old trope of hypocrisy and all that stuff, you know, is possible. Is possible to have a good exploration of this, like even old tropes, kicked to death or whatever, can still be good if done well. Religion and the religious personality is fascinating, and today we're not trained to identify them, I think. And the other day with that shooting at that school in wherever it was, Nashville or wherever it was, um, I wouldn't exempt sort of the transgender ideology from the umbrella term of sort of religious extremism or religious fanaticism or whatever. People can be fanatical anything, and I think we see it most often today in this extreme left-wing stuff, which is people are looking to satisfy their religious yearning. It's a secular religion or whatever, or secular. There are secular religions. Now, I find religion fascinating, and I find religious people fascinating. Like I find, lots of different kinds of people fascinating. I find criminals fascinating. I find, scholars fascinating, actors, narcissists. All sorts of different kinds of people can be interesting, even if, as long as we acknowledge that interesting isn't not the same as admiring, right? Being interested in is not the same thing as admiring. So anyway, this movie was not good. It was, the cinematography was good and so on. The atmosphere was trite in the sense that dark themes seem always have to happen under a gray sky. It's very annoying. I've said this before, like one of the most fascinating things about certain movies, like for instance, Dawn of the Dead, the recent one from whatever 2002 or whatever that was, 2004 I guess, the 28 days, 28 weeks later duology. They don't rely on the tired trope of darkness, gray skies, rain, as devices for creating atmosphere. The characters, the plot has to create most of the atmosphere, and it's a sign of bad movie making if the physical atmosphere has to do too much of that. Okay, so It was done a bit in The Witch. I'm not gonna deny that. But I think one of the fascinating things is the juxtaposition of physical atmosphere with thematic atmosphere, or dramatic atmosphere. Um, and that's the whole thing. I think that's where the whole idea of clowns becomes so intrinsically drawn into the horror genre, is that something so innocuous and pleasant and happy, like a clown is supposed to be, have become turned completely around to portray everything that they're not. Okay, um, so there are some good religious movies. In fact, I watched one the other day, which was not too bad. I'll put the name up here in the this picture of the cover, because I can't remember the title right off. It's a movie sort of like that one, Fragile, which was I don't know, 20 years old. Who's in that one? Is that Bill Paxton? Um, which is good. Like the juxtaposition of religiousness and fanaticism and mental illness and so on is always worth exploring. The the central problem of this movie that I'm examining today, the the Curse of Audrey Earnshaw, is that it stupidly, uh, juvenilely, is simply the, it's very much an example of a cinematic version of the horror that was perpetrated by that transgender woman, in Nashville, against that Christian school. This movie is nothing more, or at least appears to be nothing more, than somebody's disdain of Christianity. I mean, I understand that disdain, but when we're talking about art, it has to be better than that. Um, you know, tell me something new. Give me something new. Now, it wasn't completely divorced of merit. The actors were very well chosen. They were excellent actors. It's just the script was terrible. And when you ask yourself what was the point of this movie, it's simply just to dump on people, religious people, people with a simpler religious faith, and there was nothing. There was nothing new. There was nothing new in that. So, I mean, even movies like, for instance, The Witch, which is very much the same kind of movie. Um, it did a much better job at portraying the inner dynamism and struggle between good and evil. That evil has an attractiveness, and that God and the good side aren't completely powerless. That's the thing here. Like, I mean, as Augustine said many years ago, if there's a devil, then there's a God. That the existence of evil proves the existence of good. So it's a trend today, in the last decade, 2 decades, that movies are up. You're supposed to believe that there's such a thing as hell and Satan and demons and so on, but not God, but not goodness, and that evil is more powerful than good. There's ways to do that aren't completely terrible. I'm thinking of the more recent remake of The Evil Dead. I really enjoyed that movie. In fact, the remake was better than the original. And there is, evil is very powerful and all that stuff in The Evil Dead, but there is, it does still depend on the power of free will. Okay, and if you take that out, you know what? You've destroyed literature. You've destroyed cinema, because if a character has no choice, has no free will, to determine the events of the movie, the outcome, then it's not drama. It's simply I'm trying to think of the word. It's just simply watching events unfold, and it has no narrative form. If evil's inevitably going to win, then there's no point in the film. It becomes something else. It becomes history, or it becomes whatever. So, and I mean, even Aristotle pointed this out in Poetics, which I talked about a few videos ago, that there has to be something that the character can do, and even in a tragedy, the tragedy consists in the character's choices, and the interest lies in why they made those choices. And the whole principle of harmatia, where it's the essential flaw of a person's character that proves their undoing. Without that, what are we doing? We're just reading the news, so to speak. We're reading fictional news. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. And that's what you're left with in this movie. It's just a series of events telling you that Christianity and faith and God are worthless, and that there's a whole bunch of, and let me prove it by showing you how strong evil is and witches and all that stuff. But you know what? If you're going to remove God because it's superstitious, then you got to remove witches because they're superstitious. How can you have power on the one side and not on the other? There's no resistance to evil. There's no conquest that evil makes because there's no resistance. A fight between two equally, more or less equal champions is interesting. Darth Vader fighting children is not interesting. It's tragic. It's absurd. It's egregious. So this movie does nothing to be story, because, as I said, there's nothing in the hand. There's nothing in the power of anybody's choice, of anybody's free will, that makes a lick of difference. And if you want me to believe in the power of witches and the power of evil, then you've got to show me the good and the God and all that stuff. Too often, people think they're accomplishing something. I suppose atheists or humanists or probably Marxists are just, showing the power, the impotence of Christianity artificially. It's stupid. There are lots of better ways to do this, and unfortunately, whoever wrote this script had no notion of it, or at least the producers ruined it. So there you go. Movies that are good need to be, commended, and you need to be able to point out why they were good. And movies that were bad, you have to point out why they were bad. Give me something more. This is the essential problem with, I would say, my call theological stories. God's all powerful. God's omnipotent. God will win. God must win by definition. But there's something to be said about a master storyteller, and the one that jumps to mind first is Milton. How do you talk about God's unquestioning triumph in a way that's going to be interesting? Now, the struggle, the Paradise Lost, is the interesting part. Paradise Regained, not so much. It's okay. It's good. I mean, it's beautiful poetry, but thematically, it's not as interesting. And obviously, Paradise Lost has its problems. Like, when you're talking about how, Satan can conduct himself, how does he get out of hell? Um, Requires a lot of creativity. um, and if you look too closely, it becomes absurd. But the fact is, Milton can dress it up enough so you don't notice the absurdity, right? The director, the screenwriters, and producers of The Curse of Audrey, The Curse of Audrey Earnshaw, had no ability whatsoever to treat in an interesting way the problem of good and evil. Fine, tell me that evil's stronger than good, but prove it in a way that's interesting and gripping. Uh, I mean, typically the problem with Christian cinema is that evil's not given its fair shake in a way, so just good is just too powerful and becomes simplistic, sort of Hallmarkian, sort of uninteresting for the opposite reasons. So don't, there's the background here is as I said, this plague or this blight or whatever, and that it's obviously a test of faith. Yeah, fine, give me that. That's potentially interesting. But the fact is, they didn't do a very good job of developing it. And if you want me to believe that, I mean, there's just so many absurdities in the lack of historical knowledge of these people, or basic sociological knowledge. For instance, there's no grandparents in this movie. You have nuclear families living in a non-traditional setting. I mean, what historian would ever do something stupid like that? Go and visit the Mennonites down the road. It's not nuclear families living together. It's extended families living together, because that's traditional. That's agricultural. That's traditional. That's Christian. It's not this nuclear family nonsense where it's a man and a woman and their kid in the house. Where are the grandparents? Where are the aunts and uncles? It's just absurd in that way. And furthermore, this movie takes place in the autumn. I don't care how bad the drought or the plague or the whatever is. Autumn is the best time to be in agriculture, because no matter what you produce, you got it at that point. If you want to show me in late winter where everyone's actually starving to death, or early spring where it's just all the food stores are gone, that's one thing. It was a mistake to set this in the fall. Just stupid. So anyway, I'm getting a little too passionate here. So I suppose I've made my point. Anyway, I'll try to come back with some more interesting movie reviews and book reviews. And guys, thanks so much for listening. It means a lot to me. And take care.